Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rembach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's really going to help us point out something that is just so plainly obvious, but yet we're not doing it, that hopefully we will start doing it. James Millar, or Jamie, often known as, was born in Toronto. His family moved to Ottawa when he was 6 years old. Jamie's father was a PhD economist who worked for the Canadian government, and his mother was a community college teacher. As a child, Jamie was a strong student who excelled at math and science, but also loved reading, music, and sports. He was one of the first students in an innovative bilingual education program, and much of Jamie's early instruction was in French, not just language classes, but also math, science, history, and geography. He even spent 4 months as a 16-year-old in a rural village about 30 miles southeast of Bordeaux, France, where he lived with a local family and attended the town's high school. Jamie attended the University of Toronto, where he studied industrial engineering. And upon graduation, he joined Morgan Stanley in New York as a financial analyst. While there, several colleagues encouraged Jamie to apply to Harvard Business School, where he was admitted. After graduating from Harvard Business School, he joined the school's MBA admissions board, and he interviewed and evaluated thousands of talented young business people and developed an interest in the qualities that make great leaders and what makes them tick. Jamie left Harvard in 1999 and worked in the financial services industry at an early startup before he finally found his calling. In 2004, Jamie joined Tapestry Networks, a firm that creates executive peer networks, these invitation-only type groups that leaders should spend time together at, but usually do not. Jamie left Tapestry in 2013 to launch his own firm, which is SkyBridge Associates. He's also the author of Building Bridges, the Case for Executive Peer Networks, in which he shares many of the insights he's gained over the course of his career. Jamie currently lives just outside of Boston with his wife of 26 years, Maribeth, and they have 3 adult children, Haley, Evan, and Casey. Jamie Millar, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready, Jim.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. And we've had some great discussion prior to us actually hitting the record button. I hope we can carry that on here.
I expect we can.
Oh, I'm sure we can. Now, but I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, I think, as you said, what I love to do is to create and build executive peer networks. It's a fairly simple model on one level, which is basically, you take a group of about 20 people or so who should be getting together and aren't. We work a lot with corporate board directors. We work a lot with general counsel of companies. We work with other C-level and executive types. And what you find is that they really have very few opportunities to interact with each other. They have a set of colleagues internally, but they tend to see the world differently. They tend to have different issues. And so getting people together on a regular basis is what we do, and I love doing it. It's a ton of fun. I get to meet really interesting people. We get to lead fantastic conversations. And these things go on for years and years. You find that the conversations you have in meeting number 10 are very different from the ones you have in meeting number 1. And so that's really what makes these groups fun, is to begin them and work with people many times a year for years at a time.
Well, and you and I had the opportunity to talk about how really this way of learning, which I refer to also as a community of practice, is really something that could be leveraged at multiple levels within an organization. And oftentimes we get confused to think that, oh, well, this is a networking thing, which kind of, I don't know how many people actually say, hey, networking, and get all excited about it, because it's just not something that comes natural to us. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking
not
about
at all. Not at all. In fact, that's a question that a lot of people will ask me. They'll say, how can I get better at networking? And my answer is don't. right? Networking is a verb. Everybody hates networking. It feels transactional. It feels inauthentic. It's usually about glad handing and exchanging business cards. That isn't something people naturally gravitate toward, as you said, Jim. But the network, the noun, is something that's very powerful, and it's something that every leader and aspiring leader should foster. And really what we're talking about is building a network. We're not talking about networking, which, again, the transactional. We're talking about the relational, right? You're building relationships with people which are built on trust. And that is, I think, very powerful, and it's actually quite appealing to a lot of people. Everybody wants a network.
Well, and even when you started talking about, the potential power, in this community, and being able to, work with people that oftentimes we don't realize that even maybe your direct competitors, that can add value. Is that, in the book, you talk about what I refer to as 5 leadership truths. And they are that leadership is more art than science, and it's getting more difficult all the time. Beliefs drive our behaviors, and behaviors drive outcomes, so beliefs matter. Leaders are best able to refine their beliefs through conversations with trusted peers, and that even when a group of peers gets together, the design and nature of their interactions rarely supports an increase in trust over time. So when you start, talking about, all of these particular truths, I start thinking about, again, that this is at all levels. And I had mentioned to you that at Call Center Coach, we even work with the frontline supervisors. These are very, very, emerging and early leaders oftentimes. Although I can say that some of them that we're working with have been in that frontline leader role for, 10, 15, 20 years. They're lifelong supervisors, and thank goodness, because we need them. But it's, they really get stuck to that, hey, I've got all these other things I need to do, all these other tasks that, oh gosh, I have this common burning problem. And you know what? Someone else may have it too.
Absolutely. And in fact, you see that all the time. I think that this gets back to the issue around beliefs, the notion that beliefs drive behaviors, behaviors drive outcomes. And so if you want to change anything, it's not enough to just act differently. You have to actually think differently. And I think that part of the problem is that there are too few opportunities in life to really reflect on what we think, right? I think many of us assume that what we think is the only thing that you could think. Right, you're sort of in a bubble in a way, and it could be a bubble of your own personality. It could be a bubble within your organization. This is how we do things here. And what you fail to realize is that there are many other ways of approaching the same set of issues and many other ways of thinking about a set of issues. And so, just by having an opportunity at a forum to talk with other people, what you'll find in some cases is that it validates your beliefs. Everyone believes sort of the same thing, and so I'm on the right track. That's fine. That's actually that's useful information. But you'll find in other cases that no, someone else believes something quite different, and consequently they behave in a very different way. It doesn't mean that's better or worse, but at a minimum, it gives you something to think about. A lot of leadership issues are contextual, right? So what works in one corporate culture may not apply to another, and so that's why we talk not just about what people do, but why they do it. And then people can pick and choose. They can decide which of these principles work and which don't. But so we're not looking for best practice, right? We're just trying to look for understanding, revealing more understanding. But I think that you're right. Even at a very low level of leadership, frontline leadership, if you will, there are many ways to skin that cat and many ways to approach a set of issues, regardless of what they are. So I think it's a very, very transferable need and skill set to engage with peers like that.
Well, and I also think it's important to help these people at that early age to where if they ever do make it up to that senior level and maybe even that suite, that they're already in the practice of doing this.
Right. And because let's be honest, the people, if a 25-year-old, let's say, right? So, so let's say you're an early stage leader, 25, 30 years old, the group of people who are your peers in other organizations are probably going to stay your peers for the rest of your career. There's a good chance, right? So why not build that network when you're 25 years old? It's much harder to build that network when you're 50 years old. It's much easier to build it, and then you all sort of grow at the same pace, and some will do better than others, obviously, but you find yourself having that access to that network. Again, you're not networking, but you have access to that powerful network all the way throughout your career.
Well, and I'd also like to raise out one of the points that you had mentioned. You referred to it as an organizational bubble. And one of the things that I often find too is that, if you're only, convening and conveying and communing with your own four walls, your perspectives rarely do change. You need to step outside of that in order to really get different perspectives. Now, you talked about contextual. However, I often see that too many times people use contextual as a barrier to opening up their mind. Oh, well, they're not in the insurance industry, for example. However, when you start looking at the companies that are doing the disrupting, they're not staying within their own organizational bubble or industry bubble for that matter.
Mm-mm. Absolutely not. And you're right. So I think there's the bubble. I think there's a couple of challenges. You're right. There's the knowledge bubble, right? That you're not appreciating the range of issues. And to your point, within a given industry, the practices may be behind the times, right? So you may need to talk with people who are in other industries. We often will have groups that have folks from multiple industries. And so you have the benefit of learning what other industries are doing. The other thing that we haven't talked about is within your own organization, you have the four walls, but you also have political constraints, right? You may be unwilling for a host of reasons to reveal some of your limitations or to reveal your concerns or to talk about questions that you have, right? Some cultures, some corporate cultures just don't support that kind of inquiry. And so I think what you can do with a group of peers from other organizations, you're a lot safer, right? You can ask the hard questions. You can reveal weaknesses about yourself and ask for feedback or for suggestions that you just can't sometimes within an organizational setting.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. We hear a lot in leadership circles about, the importance of vulnerability. That vulnerability helps to, give you an opportunity to build trust, to make connection and build rapport and all that. However, depending on whether it's, geographic cultures or organizational cultures, vulnerability also can make you set up to be a target. So you have to I think there's some nuance there that you really have to be aware of. And going outside of your organization may be the place where, you can share and not have to worry about that, like you have said.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one other thing that you had mentioned you mentioned in the book is to me, I think really intriguing. And you talk about the 8 important concepts associated with this. And the 8 important concepts are community, beliefs, questions, stories, leadership, change, experts, and trust. And when I started looking at this list, I'm like, okay, well, there's 8, but it's not a scenario where they're equally, important. And I do understand totally how they overlap and interrelate and all that. However, if you were to start to look at these 8 important concepts, what stands out to you as most important?
Well, I think it really is the last one, and you're right. These are not independent factors. They're all important, but they all kind of come together. And the reason I listed those 8 and ended with trust is because at the end of the day, trust really is the glue that holds any group together. It holds any relationship together. It's hard to envision any relationship that's productive where the individuals don't trust each other, and it's exacerbated even further when you've got a group of 20 people. If there's factions or distrust within the group, it falls apart pretty quickly. So trust really is the glue that gets to all of that. Now, the parts that go into that, the issue around beliefs, the issue around expertise. I have a strong belief that the discussion leader doesn't have to be an expert. I think that sometimes experts in any field are, again, blinded to opportunity. It's only after you sort of ask the stupid but perceptive question that sometimes you get to a conversation you should have been having. And so, these things all build up. But at the end of the day, trust really is the most fundamental of those 8 items. And by the way, the design of any group should be should enhance trust. I think, like so many things in life, any group, any product, any service is only as good as the design. The execution is important, obviously, but if you execute something that's poorly designed, you're still not going to get a great outcome. And so, it's the design, the way these groups are constructed, the nature of the interaction, the frequency, the format should all be developed to enhance trust over time.
One of the things that you mentioned, well, of course, there's many things that were mentioned in the book, but another thing that stood out for me is your emphasis on questions and talking about the importance of questions. So when you start talking about these groups and things like that, how much do you have to help people to be able to focus in on the question and questioning aspects of the community?
Well, that's a big part of what we do, because you're right. I think people don't naturally look at issues in their life and form and put them in the form of good questions. I think the one thing I've learned, I've actually read a lot of books about. I've spent the last 25 years, both from my time, you mentioned my stint on the Harvard Business School admissions board, where I was a director of admissions, all the way through today, and you find yourself asking questions of people, and so many people ask closed-end questions, yes, no questions, which very rarely reveal valuable information. This is actually, I think, a takeaway beyond executive peer networks that any of your listeners or I guess now viewers, now that we're also on video, can take away. That instead of asking, if you're a supervisor, instead of asking someone, to a yes no question, something like will the report be done on Tuesday? That's not a very useful question. The answer is yes or no. Whereas if you say to someone, when will the report be done? You get a much richer answer. If the person says Tuesday, great. If they say Monday or Thursday or something else, that leads to a different set of questions. And so I guess my point being that questions have the power, the right questions, particularly open-ended questions, have the power to reveal assumptions and beliefs. It gets back to this question about beliefs, right? What do you believe? Sometimes forming a question, it forces you to really reflect on what you believe and the assumptions that you're making. So that's why I personally love both asking great questions, but also having people answer them. But it takes a lot of practice. And a big part of what we do before meetings is spend time just talking with folks about their opportunities, their challenges, kind of what's going on in their lives. And what we'll be doing is, as we're talking with everyone in the group before a meeting, is just listening for patterns. We'll find that the same issues will sometimes come up over and over, and we'll use those to form open-ended questions that the group can lean into. But it isn't something often that people will do well on their own. It often takes a bit of practice and a bit of work.
Okay. Well, talking about that whole questions thing, there was, and I just was talking about this with my, call center coach, community on our weekly Q&A, and was talking about a book by one of my guests, Bob Tiede, which is titled "Great Leaders Ask Questions." And to me, when you started talking about that, even going through the book and when Bob was on the show, I mean, for me, it's like these are a whole new set of habits that we really have to focus in on, because oftentimes it's our conditioning and things that we've been exposed to that cause us to actually, communicate in this way. And I think all of us have to really visit and revisit often, how we go about this whole open-ended questioning thing. Because I think we're stifling our own opportunities by not being able to do that.
No, I agree. It's something I always challenge people to just, even for a day, make note of how many times they ask closed-end questions of others and how often they ask open-ended questions. This could be in your personal life as well, by the way. You go home with your kids or with your spouse or with your friends. How often you ask those closed-end questions. It's remarkable how often people do that. And I think you can learn so much more. I've managed to train myself, but it's hard. It's really hard to consistently ask open-ended questions.
Most definitely. Okay, so when I started thinking about all of this experience and history and really, hands-on work in this particular area that you've done, I started thinking about, okay, well, can you pick out or think about, a potential success scenario where somebody was, coming and being, became part of, one of a particular community that you helped to organize, and then all of a sudden they just had this leapfrog opportunity? Because even when we're starting to refer to people at that senior level, their opportunities don't stop. I mean, they come in other different ways. Can you remember what kind of stood out to you that they would contribute, this leap, to actually participating in a peer network?
You're right. I think that there are a couple of examples I would give, and I don't know that I would say they're necessarily leaps. These are already, most of the people I work with are already at a pretty high level. And so, and by the way, when you get to that level, you're not going to learn brand new things. If you are, if you're learning something that you've never heard before, you're probably asleep at the switch, right? So, when you get to that sort of elevated level, a lot of it is nuance. A lot of it is about, just sort of that fine tuning, and which does make a big difference, obviously, at that level. The one thing I will say, the powerful, you talked earlier about the communities of practice, and I think this notion of community is one we haven't talked enough about yet, because we've talked about the value of the insights and the learning and the questions. And there's obviously a relationship benefit, but I think one of the most powerful benefits of a group like this is the power of community. And I'm reminded that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically after you have your sort of your physical needs and your safety needs met, the next need is the need for belonging and the need for community. And so it's a very powerful human need. And to your question, the two most memorable comments people have made to me, they're very senior people, make a ton of money, top of their game. One person said, this is a group of competitors, actually. We had a group of about 20 competitors. And this person said, you've taken a group of people who used to see each other as rivals, and we now have relationships, right? We see each other as friends. And to me, that was a very powerful transformation, right? And I think that sense of community and that sense of, no, I don't have 20 other people want to stick a knife in my back. I have 20 other people that are here to kind of hold me up when I need help. So I think that was a powerful statement somebody made. Another person in a different group made a similar point, which was, you've helped me to feel less like I'm on an island. And again, a senior person in their organization, but they felt kind of alone. There's this, it's a cliche, but it's true. It is lonely at the top. And I've had a lot of people tell me that it is hard, and just realizing that you've got other people who feel the same way you do, that face the same challenges, it makes them feel less lonely. And so I think some of the benefits are as much psychological as they are kind of measurable in traditional professional terms. I think it's made people feel a lot happier. I had a guy years ago in a group. This is a private equity investor. This guy, again, making a ton of money, super successful. He told me that this was the meetings we would have every quarter were the one thing he looked forward to every quarter on his calendar. So this is a guy, he's doing deals with billions of dollars, and running around, and these meetings with a group of peers were what he looked forward to the most. So I just think that, so at an emotional level, it's very gratifying.
As you were talking, I started thinking as well that we often find the same thing apply, at all those different levels that we were talking about. So even talking about that frontline leader, I remember sitting with a senior VP of a global organization who shared with me that they had a senior level meeting of executives, and that he was the one who was given the responsibility for the contact center. None of the other executives wanted it because they didn't understand it. They said the people that work in there are weird because it's not like any other part of the business.
Sure.
So even people who are leading in those, parts of an organization may find that oftentimes they feel alone, that they can't connect and talk with anybody. It's also when you start talking with people who are in specialized groups and areas, it's like, people may not be able to speak my language. I feel like I'm a foreigner. And so that community has to come from outside.
Has to. Right. It has to.
Okay, so everything that we're talking about here, gosh, the whole connection of community and the power of it, and quite frankly, that's what has allowed humans to survive, the ways that they have. It's the power of the community. The community wins out every single time. So thanks for bringing that up and emphasizing that point. But a lot of this is just filled with all kinds of different emotions. And one of the things that we look at on the Fast Leader Show are quotes to make sure that we're focusing those emotions in the right direction. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Well, anyone who's read my book, and I hope those listening or watching will pick it up. It's a quick book to read. It was designed to be read in less than an hour. It actually is filled with tons of quotes that I personally like. That have inspired and influenced me. So there are lots of quotes there. There's a few other quotes I would raise, and let me just give you some. We can talk about them or not. The first is by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I have been accused at times of being a bit of a dreamer, and I think a leader has to be a dreamer. I think if you don't have a dream, you don't have a vision. If you don't have a vision, I don't think you're a leader. So the classic Gabriel Garcia Marquez quote, that it's not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams. which I think is just so true. To that same point, you've got Steve Jobs is I think an inspiration to many of us, that says if you're working on something exciting that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you, and I connect with that very much. And then the last one, in terms of just what we want to do with our lives, there's a fellow by the name of Wes Jackson, who is a leading figure in the sustainable agriculture movement, who said if your life's work can be accomplished in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. So I love that one as well.
Well, those are several that are really good, especially like the last one as far as that's concerned. I mean, we have to sometimes move our target to a place way down the road because we're limiting ourselves. Yep. Okay, so now talking about limitations or maybe opportunities, when you start thinking about the work that you're doing right now and some of the goals that you have, I know in order for you to even get to that point, there's humps that you've been over in order to help you move into this particular direction. So is there a time where you've gotten over the hump that you can share?
Oh my gosh, over the last 25 years, I've been over many humps, and I think I'm a big believer that humps create opportunities. There's this notion of disruption and kind of inflection points in anyone's life, and oftentimes those inflection points are an opportunity to really move in a new direction and to try something different. I think for me, we mentioned at the beginning when you were introducing me about how I had spent 9 years. I was a partner at a firm called Tapestry Networks, a very good firm. But I found at a certain point that the direction they were moving wasn't inspiring me anymore. There were things I wanted to accomplish, and I felt that I needed a different professional platform. And I actually looked around. My intention was never to launch my own firm, but rather to find a group of other people that were interested in doing the same kind of thing. And quite honestly, I couldn't find them. I didn't see anyone else that was doing what I wanted to do the way I wanted to do it. And so I took the leap and said, well, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to, and I brought one of my colleagues with me. I brought some of the work with me. I negotiated with my employer. I had a non-solicit, so I couldn't just steal the business. I had to negotiate a fair arrangement for both parties, and use that as a platform to build my own firm. And that notion that we don't have to have a job. We have to have a career and a life and a profession and dreams and so forth. But that, to me, the getting over the hump was recognizing that, there's lots of ways to do what I want to do. As long as I'm clear about what I want to do, if I can't do it working for someone else, well, then I'll do it, and be my own boss and create my own firm. And so for me, that's been the motivation. And I now have a 20-year plan that goes way beyond where I was when I first started. But I think just that leap, that kind of that recognition that the way you have been doing it may not be the right way to do it going forward, I think has been a very powerful insight. Okay, so as you were talking, I started thinking about that time when you were with Tapestry and that that middle ground point. I mean, you talked about not connecting with the vision and the path and all of that and where the organization was going. But how do you actually move from that position to ultimately setting a course that takes you outside? I mean, how long did that transition actually occur for you? I think it had, again, like I said, my original plan had been to find other people. So it was becoming clear that it wasn't the place I needed or wanted to stay long term. And so my first step was to, quote unquote, look for a job, as people do, right? So you say, are there other people, other organizations doing something similar? And I talked to a bunch of people, and it was never really clear that what they were doing was quite what I almost joined one firm that was doing something quite different. And well, the idea was maybe we'd kind of bolt on my expertise to but that was sort of hard culturally, and for a number of reasons it was probably a bit of an unworkable puzzle. And so, like I said, as time went on, it just became more and more clear that I was either going to have to compromise what I wanted to do, which would have defeated the whole purpose of leaving, or created a new platform. So instead of finding the platform. So it was a process that probably took, overall, I don't recall exactly 6 to 12 months, I think. But, once I got to the point where it became clear that this was the only viable option, then it was pretty fast. I made my decision and moved forward pretty quickly to to go solo.
Well, that does seem like it is actually pretty fast. I mean, I also wonder at what point and how long do you let it linger for a lot of folks? So in other words, hey, I've been in this state for 3 years and I still haven't, made that leap because of, whatever
Right.
factors, fears, this, that, and the other. And that, I mean, to me, you essentially said it and then, you moved on to it.
Yeah. Look, I've been feeling discomfort. Like I said, I think in my life, whenever I've felt discomfort, that's been a good thing, right? That's been a powerful motivator because you have to do a bit of a visualization, a bit of a visualization exercise. You sort of imagine, okay, project myself out 20 years. If I stay where I am, what will my life be like? Like you literally have to close your eyes and imagine yourself going home from work at the end of the day and how you're going to feel. Like you have to feel it, viscerally in your body. And I find that once you realize, what, the path I'm on is not sustainable. We only get one shot at this life. And, and yes, it's scary to make a change, but once you realize that it's just as scary sometimes to stay where you are, I think that can be an extra motivator. And so, and by the way, I've always enjoyed the process of looking for new opportunities. I'm a big believer in sort of informational interviewing, not just kind of throwing resumes around, but just, going to meet people in a very non-threatening way. Say, I'm interested in what you do. I wonder if there's some parallel with what I do, and, that sort of thing. I find people tend to be pretty open to that. If I got a call and someone said, I want to talk to you about what you do, I'd spend half an hour and have a cup of coffee with someone. Why wouldn't you, right? In this day and age, you'd be crazy not to. So I think people ought to do that more. And you find through those conversations that ideas emerge. And the other thing that's important in my case was having the support of my wife and my family, because obviously there was a short-term financial hit. We walked away from a pretty full book of business into something quite a bit less. The major client I was working on, I was contractually prohibited from working with. And so, it was a bit of a lean time the first year or two, but you have to just accept that. You say, this is, part of a 20-year plan, and I'm going to invest for a few years and it'll pay off in the end. You have to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing.
Well, and we are totally glad that you have done that. And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Jamie, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Jamie Millar, are you ready to hoe down?
I am.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I do not give negative feedback as well as I should. I am a nice guy, and I think that is both a blessing and a curse. And I probably have a hard time, giving constructive criticism.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
So it was when I was working at Harvard Business School, the dean, John MacArthur at the time, we were in a meeting and somebody mentioned an initiative and said, oh, but we don't have any money for this. And he said the most perceptive thing anyone's ever said, which is the world is awash in money. He said, look around. Everywhere you look, there's money. He said, the world is awash in money. What the world lacks is good ideas. And so for me, that has been a driving leadership vision. I have never viewed resources as an impediment to getting things done.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I think it's a couple things. I think there's curiosity. I've always been an intensely curious person ever since I was a kid. And I think also authenticity. I've never tried to be other than I am. This notion of fake it till you make it, I think is total BS. I think that people can and should be authentic with each other and just be comfortable with who they are. And I think that people, getting back to trust, I think people trust authentic people. And so I think that my authenticity, which comes sort of naturally, has been a real key to my success.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Well, I think it is that. I think my ability to build trust and establish relationships. I like people. When I talk with people about themselves or about what I'm doing, I'm sincerely interested. Yeah. And so I think just that curiosity about people and wanting to relate to people, I think is a great tool.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to your book on your show notes page as well.
Can I give two, or do I have to limit it to one?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so the first one about relationships is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is, it's old, but I think it's still timeless. I read it when I was about 6 years old. I was or maybe older than that, 8 years old. But my grandfather had an old copy, and it blew my mind. You know, the idea of focusing on other people, and they think you're a genius if you allow them to talk about themselves. So I think that's a great one. And then the other is also a classic, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a great lesson in long-term thinking and kind of having the big picture.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Jamie Millar. Now, Millar is actually spelled Millar. Okay, Jamie, this is my last Hump Day Hold On question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the knowledge and skills that you have now, and you can take them back with you, but you can't take everything back, but you can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I think I would bring back my comfort with entrepreneurship, which I have developed. I think when I grew up, I grew up in Ottawa, as we mentioned, it's a government town. It's like growing up in Washington, D.C. And most people I knew worked for the government or in industries that supported the government. There wasn't a great deal of business, wasn't a great deal of risk-taking, entrepreneurship. And I have become very comfortable with kind of that type of risk. And I wish at age 25, I had known how much fun an entrepreneurial career could be, and had been a little more comfortable with doing stuff like that on my own.
Jamie, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Sure. Well, Jim, they can find me through our website. It's skybridge.associates. And you can contact me through that. There's lots of information about what we do and links, obviously, to learn more about the book, Building Bridges, as well.
Jamie Millar, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.